Welcome everyone to this explainer. If you're a focused learner trying to figure out how the absolute most successful organizations and movements actually operate, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're unpacking a really counterintuitive idea from the fascinating book, Strategy Without Design. We're going to uncover a hidden truth here. The most staggering, long-lasting successes in human history, they rarely come from these deliberate, grand master plans. Instead, they come from the silent efficacy of indirect action.
Now you might be wondering, does success actually require a master plan? We all kind of carry around this deeply held orthodox belief that to win, whether that's in business, leadership, or just life in general, you absolutely need a rigid, top-down plan. We're taught from day one to map out our territory, set these huge overarching goals, and then just force the world to bend to our will. But what if that's entirely wrong? What if the harder you try to design success, the faster it literally slips right through your fingers? Well, we are about to take a bit of a paradoxical journey that's going to completely flip how you think about ambition and planning.
Okay, let's dive into this with a story from 1974. So the country of Bangladesh was suffering through a totally devastating famine. Muhammad Yunus, an economics professor at the time, was deeply frustrated because his elegant academic theories were doing absolutely nothing to help the starving people right outside his university doors. So he just walked into a local village. There he met a woman making bamboo stools. She was completely trapped in poverty because she had to borrow the equivalent of just 22 US cents from predatory lenders just to buy her basic materials. Yunus didn't go back and draft a 50-page corporate strategy. He didn't form a committee. He just reached into his own pocket and made a tiny, spontaneous, indirect action to solve the exact problem right in front of him.
And from that ridiculously tiny starting point, things just organically gathered momentum. Yunus simply kept adapting. He dealt with immediate local problems day by day. He had literally no grand vision of some global banking empire. Yet, that hyper-local, completely spontaneous coping action eventually evolved into the Grameen Bank. Fast forward to today, and that bank has distributed a staggering $6.55 billion in microloans. That's billion with a B, lifting millions out of poverty and earning Yunus the Nobel Peace Prize. The entire strategy was completely emergent.
And you know, this phenomenon isn't just limited to microfinance. Think about Richard Branson. It's the late 1970s, and he's stranded in the Caribbean because his flight got canceled. He didn't sit there drafting an aviation business plan. He was just a super frustrated traveler trying to get home. On a total whim, he chartered a plane for $2,000, borrowed a little blackboard, and sold seats to his fellow stranded passengers for $39 a pop. And just like that, Virgin Airways was born. Serendipitously, right out of a negative, immediate circumstance. It's a beautiful illustration of how just wayfinding through turbulent waters often leads to billion-dollar ideas way faster than sitting in a fancy boardroom dreaming up some grand vision.
Section 1. The danger of design. Because as we'll see, there's definitely a darker side to this paradox. If indirect, spontaneous action is so powerful, what happens when humans try to play God and force rigid control onto complex, living environments? Well, things tend to break, and sometimes catastrophically. The writer Nassim Nicholas Taleb actually calls this dangerous bias the Platonic OC trap. It's this idea of mistaking the neat map for the messy territory. As humans, we just love things that are visual, palpable, and easy to chart on a graph, right? We fall head over heels for the neat, top-down map, and we completely ignore the messy, incredibly unpredictable reality of the actual territory on the ground. We just falsely assume that because we can draw a nice straight line on paper, we can force the real world to walk it.
Let me give you a perfect example. The story of Dr. Martin's boots. These were originally designed by a German doctor using old tires for comfortable soles. They were literally meant for postmen and factory workers. But organically, completely spontaneously, they were adopted by all these youth cultures, from mods to punks, as this powerful symbol of rebellion. The boot was basically a blank slate, infinitely adaptable, precisely because the company had no grand design for it. But then, in the not disastrous 100 million pound loss in just 3 years. By trying to deliberately control the phenomenon, they destroyed the exact open, organic space that made the boots so successful in the first place.
Time and time again, we see these spectacular failures of what's called made order. Back in the 18th century, German state planners tried to maximize timber profits by planting these incredibly neat, easily harvestable monocrop forests. On paper, brilliant. In reality, clearing out the underbrush and removing the natural diversity totally destroyed the soil ecology and invited massive pest invasions. We saw a similar thing during the Aceh tsunami relief.
Well-intentioned international agencies completely flooded the zone with centralized, macro-level aid. They ended up clogging airports and warehouses while completely ignoring the immediate, micro-level needs of local fishermen and farmers who were just trying to rebuild their lives. When we impose high modernist planning on highly complex systems, we so often cause catastrophic, hidden damage.
Section 2. The unseen mechanics. So, if top-down design is so incredibly flawed, how does the world actually function so well? Let's take a look.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is understanding why bottom-up action actually rules the world. The 19th century French economist Frédéric Bastiat totally marveled at this. He pointed out the sheer miracle that 1 million people in Paris woke up every single day and were fed. Bread, fish, meat, and wine just flowed right into the city with astonishing regularity. And yet there was absolutely no central minister of food distribution orchestrating the whole shebang. Bastiat realized something profound. A good economist has to look beyond the immediate visible effect of an action. They have to consider those unseen, uncoordinated actions of thousands of independent people, the effects that must be foreseen, to truly understand how an incredibly complex system works completely flawlessly without any central planner at all.
The philosopher Friedrich Hayek formalized this whole idea by drawing a really stark line between two concepts. On one hand, you have made order. This is artificial, deliberate, and entirely top-down. Think of an organization chart or a blueprint for an engine. But on the other hand, you have spontaneous order, and this is entirely different. It organically emerges from the everyday, simple interactions of individuals just going about their daily lives. Things like human language, our culture, the sprawling layout of ancient cities, and even free markets. These are all spontaneous orders. They aren't built, they're grown.
To put that into perspective, think about one of our absolute most fundamental human institutions, money. How did that even start? Well, it definitely wasn't by some grand central bank decree. The economist Carl Menger showed step by step how money evolved entirely mindlessly. It started simply with individuals bartering for their immediate needs. Then, some of the more clever traders realized, hey, I'd have way better luck if I traded for goods that literally everyone wants, like salt or rare shells, just to make future exchanges easier. Then, others saw this working and simply imitated those successful traders. Eventually, almost like magic, a single medium naturally emerged as money. It was a totally unintended consequence of local problem solving.
And this perfectly grounds Adam Smith's famous theory. When Smith talked about being led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of a person's intention, he wasn't talking about magic or mysticism. He was describing this exact unseen, spontaneous cooperation of individuals who are simply acting to improve their own local, immediate situations. Just by trying to make their own lives a little bit better, they inadvertently weave this incredibly complex, highly efficient social and economic tapestry. It's a system so intricate that no single human mind could ever possibly comprehend or design it from scratch.
Section 3. The power of small details. Let's move to this section and see how this builds into solving massive, seemingly insurmountable real-world problems today.
Back in the 1980s, the New York City subway system was quite literally on the verge of total collapse. It was completely overrun by serious, violent crime. When David Gunn took over as transit director, everyone, and I mean everyone, told him to fight this massive crime wave directly, with these spectacular, sweeping interventions. But Gunn, he ignored them. Instead, he focused obsessively on a tiny indirect detail, cleaning the graffiti off the train cars. Car by car, line by line. Every single time a car was tagged, it was pulled from service and cleaned immediately. He paired this with a really strict, zero-tolerance crackdown on simple fare beating. By relentlessly focusing on these minor details, he was indirectly sending a powerful message of maintained order.
And the outcome? Absolutely staggering. By just relentlessly fixing the small details, Gunn triggered a massive deviation-amplifying process. The message was sent loud and clear that someone was actually in charge, and that order mattered. Without ever directly fighting the macro-level catastrophe in some huge, spectacular way, this incredibly indirect approach led to an unbelievable 75% drop in serious felonies. Think about that. Fixing small details, sustained over time, radically and indirectly transformed the entire environment.
We see this exact same dynamic playing out in the corporate world too, most famously with Toyota. Toyota didn't dethrone General Motors by rolling out some flashier billion-dollar grand blueprint. No way. They did it through Kaizen, a deeply ingrained philosophy of continuous soul-searching and the painstakingly slow accumulation of really small gains right there on the factory floor. They never aimed to just be the biggest. They simply aimed to fix tiny, mundane inefficiencies every single day.
This perfectly comes to life in the 5 S's of their Japanese manufacturing attitude. Think of it like a natural progression. First, you have seiro, simply removing unnecessary items. Once that's all clear, you move to seiton, organizing what's left so it's super easy to locate. Then comes seiso, keeping that environment spotlessly clean. Building right on top of that is seiketsu, standardizing those clean operations. And finally, the glue that literally holds the whole thing together, shitsuke, observing those rules and practicing them every single day. These aren't just fancy corporate strategies pasted on a break room wall. They represent a deeply internalized culture of self-cultivation. It's an attitude that treats the smallest, most mundane detail with intense respect, which organically created an absolute juggernaut of quality and efficiency.
Section 4. Embracing wayfinding. This leads us right to the climax of our explainer. How do we actually adopt this mindset and embrace knowing as we go?
Well, we can actually look to the ancient wisdom of the Tao Te Ching for some guidance here. Lao Tzu wrote, "Ruling a big country is like cooking a small fish." I love that. What it means is, if you poke at it too much, if you overmanage it, or if you constantly over-interfere, you're going to destroy it. Systems, whether we're talking about global economies, your business, or even just your own personal projects, they all have a natural, inherent potential. When we aggressively try to force them into our preconceived, rigid designs, we usually end up completely ruining the dish.
So the crucial point is embracing what the authors refer to as strategic blandness. I know, it sounds a bit funny, but trust me, it's a total superpower. Strategic blandness means taking a humble, nimble stance. It means abandoning that rigid, feverish ambition in favor of navigating uncertainty through subtle, continuous, indirect action. It's all about wayfinding. It's recognizing that knowing as we go, simply adapting to the immediate problems right in front of us, is vastly more resilient and effective than trying to map out and plan everything before we even take the first step.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought that really completely shatters the orthodox business mindset. I want you to look at your own life right now, your own projects, your own ambitions. Are you suffocating them with too much design? Are you missing the 22-cent opportunities right in front of your face simply because you're too busy staring at a 5-year master plan? What if your absolute best strategy for success, starting right now, is to simply stop trying to design one? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating concept with us in this explainer today, and remember, keep looking for those small, unseen details. They just might change the world.